Why do they keep, there we go. Welcome Yael Parag here from Reichman University for a short keynote.
My pleasure. Nashledanou, děkuji moc krát.
Hi, good morning. I'm very happy to be here and this very prestigious company. I'd like to start with take my position here just with few observations about previous talks. So as an Israeli, I must say that when we heard here about practicing and being ready, and I think Israel is very well prepared in the sense that it has a lot of practice, and we see that practice does not make perfect, but it definitely improves. As a societal resilience, solidarity is crucial. I think that we see that one of the weaknesses of Israel society is eroding solidarity between different part of members of society, and we feel it in our ability to react. And about the need in mental resilience. Resilience is not only about having the infrastructure ready, but it's also about having the people being capable of absorbing very stressful situation. And about Eeyore, so maybe we do need Winnie the Pooh, we need Kanga, the responsible adult, we need all the gang in order to have a functioning society. So that's just an observation. Now, I'm an energy expert, and I'm coming from the social sciences, and my view of the energy system is that it is a socio-techno-economic system. While we're very much focusing often on the infrastructure, on the wires and the generators, we should also look at the reasons why we have such an energy system. The energy system function to provide purpose, and the purpose are the energy services. So I'm looking at energy policy. In particular, I'm looking at future energy systems which are decentralized, decarbonized, all these words that, these are the topics that I'm working on. It's not only a decentralized system, but it's also a new management system. It's about controlling the system differently. It's about how we coordinate different resources in the energy transition. And my talk today will focus mostly on the energy transition. Okay. Okay. Oh, all right. I'm a bit. I cannot see what you see. All right. So here is a functioning society in the 1950s. From looking at some of the audience, I think you know, this is familiar to you, right? So functioning society, people in the office doing work, maybe banks, people in audience studying, education, and health system. Very basic service of society, no cyber threats, very resilient to cyber if this word exists. And if there is a shortcut in electricity, something happens for a short while or longer while, most of the functions could be well maintained and what we call bounce back. Maybe you'll need to open the window to have some more light. And look at our society today, right? So we don't need to say a word about how this society is entirely dependent on electricity. If there is no electricity here, we can all go home. I mean, we can, of course, keep communicating with words, but just to make a point how more independent we become on a single resource, electricity, which then enables also the communication and these important things. All right, so moving on to societal resilience. What is societal resilience? Actually, I have to get closer. It's the ability of society to resist and recover quickly from major shocks like armed attacks, natural disasters, health crisis, or critical infrastructure failure. Now, in my talk, I'm focusing mostly on electricity, but you see this Venn diagram of what resilience is. So resilience is hard to define because it's the intersect between different components, between risks and vulnerability, not only vulnerability in the supply chain, but also vulnerability of the society, who are the most vulnerable people in society that still need to be well taken care of. It's about community connectedness, as I said, solidarity, the ability of one part of the community to make sure that the rest are fine. It's about the availability of resources, both social capital, but of course, real capital and investment. It's about planning and procedures. Again, I think it reflects on many of the previous speakers who said we need to be prepared, and prepare is being preparing planning, but also practicing different scenarios. So with this in mind, I'm looking at what the C40 city put forward as interconnectedness and interdependencies in society, in particular electricity here I put, but also energy. So you can see that energy and communication and transportation, which is of course a form of energy, are all very crucial and very connected to all the other very functions of society. We can look at it more granularly, like at other crucial organizations in society that provide us lots of benefits. So we need to make sure that the hospital can function, banks, military, police, schools, and other emergency services. But as social scientists, as someone who's working on energy services and energy as a social technical system, we are interested more in the services. So hospitals are there to provide us health services. Schools are there to provide us education. And by putting the focus on the service that we need, that these organizations provide us, we can think about resiliency in different ways. We want to maintain health rather than only the hospital. So if we can provide good health without hospitals, we are more resilient and we are less dependent on one organization. Just think about COVID and school and how working from home allow us, the community, to be more resilient in terms of the economy to function. So again, when we look at the societal resilience with energy in our mind, we need to think about how society can withstand and recover swiftly from significant disruption, particularly in the context of climate change, which have many implications on the energy system and society, geopolitical instability, internal political conflicts. I think European countries, of course my country as well, are going through these rifts in society, which weaken solidarity and which again weakens the resilience of the society. We should closer look, as we do here, in the interconnectedness between infrastructure. And on the one hand, this interconnectedness allows us to improve the services immensely, but also it creates new type of vulnerability. And about the energy transition, which I'll just put a focus on for a short while. So the energy transition essentially is moving from one vertically integrated system heavily based on fossil fuels, dispatchable resources, into this clean, local power with many redundancies inherent in the system, many resources. So essentially, we see dramatic changes in the way we provide electricity. We're moving to a decarbonized, decentralized system. We're moving to a system which heavily relies on non-dispatchable and intermittent energy resources, which make coordination much more difficult, and also long-term planning, a crucial thing. We're looking at liberalized market, which allows many actors to enter the market, providing lots of better services, but also many diverse interests and many more opening to attacks if someone has the will to do that, motivation to do that. We also see significant change in the demand side. We see a massive increase in electrification, so we are relying more on one sort of energy resource, electricity, in particular our heating systems and mobility, more dependent on electricity. We see an increase in demand for cooling services due to climate change and development, and this becomes a significant, again, threat to our ability to provide all the needs. Cooling becomes essential. We also see a new type of demand like data centers and AI. And if you look at the statistics, you see that for many years, or for about a decade, the electricity consumption was quite stable. And suddenly we're getting to an era where the demand for electricity increases. So it's not only improving the existing system, it's also about creating more resources. So many benefits, but different type of threats and vulnerability and uncertainty. And uncertainty is again, it's a okay, I have one more minute, but I'll need that too. So just saying, maintaining societal functions depends on the social resilience, individuals and community, the resources, their accessibility to resource, their connectedness, the mutual responsibility and the mutual connectedness. It's also about organizational resilience, the ability of organizations that provide crucial services in society to be prepared, their ability to switch from one type of resource to other in order to maintaining the service that they provide to society. It's about the organizational attention. Sometimes these crucial organizations are so absorbed with the daily routines that they cannot raise their head and see, okay, what are the, what other area of vulnerability exists and what they should pay attention to. The short and long-term planning, and of course, the ability to execute this planning and actually to act in order to improve the services. It's about the electricity system resilience in time of climate change and in time of decentralized energy systems. So it's all the investments in maintenance, redundancy, management. And of course, if we here at the EIS looking at the big risks. So it's about the power system resilience to withstand highly impact, low probability events, which is raising the head even higher and make even less likely to happen. Just to summarize, in summary, societal resilience is not a simple yes or no, it's a continuum, and we need to assess it over different aspects and parameters. It's made up by various factors and elements that contribute together to the societal ability to accept and recover. There is no single parameter, as I said earlier. Each of these elements, which we need to recognize, and it's really cultural dependence and nation dependent, need to be assessed, and we need to make sure that we are prepared to any changes in the preparedness. A well-structured action plan is essential in response. And last but definitely not least, we must pay attention to inclusivity, making sure that no one is left behind, that the society as a whole is resilient to stand in different type of threat. And I think that we should not underestimate this thing as part of our solidarity. So I'm sorry that I ran a bit behind, and thank you for listening. And I'm happy to invite the prestigious panel to join me here.
Welcome, Bob, and Steve, Stefano, and Sally.
Is it here? Oh. Very bad in pronouncing names that are not Israeli. Oh, sorry, you can't hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so apologize, I'm very bad in pronouncing non-Israeli names, so I'll ask you to pronounce your name as I should. The title of this session is What is the Impact on Societal Resilience of Increasingly Complex and Tightly Coupled Systems, and how do we need to think differently to address them? And we have here very diverse points of view on this to try to start referring to this question. So the way we'll do it, I'll ask each one of you a question, but before answering, please present yourselves and say how your work is related to societal resilience.
I start, okay. Okay, my name is Stefano Panzieri. I'm working in Roma Tre University. I'm the coordinator of a laboratory working on critical infrastructures, especially on modeling of critical infrastructures. We have participated to many European FP7 H2020 projects. And our best expertise, as I said before, is modeling of cascading effects. And thank you very much for the nice presentation you did before, because it's exactly the topic that we are dealing with usually. We have also cooperated with the Italian Prime Minister Council for modeling purposes, of course. And I was the general chair of CRITIS 2024 last week, a small conference on critical infrastructures.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Nice to be with you all, and great to be with the EAS Council. Thanks for having me back. My name is Bob Kolaski. I am a senior vice president at a company called Exeger. We are a supply chain risk analysis company, and we help illuminate risks in supply chain, understand how supply chains work, support the government, particularly U.S. government, as well as big Fortune 500 and the like companies understand how their supply chains work and make decisions to mitigate risk and to hopefully build resilience in the supply chain. I came to that job after leaving the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, where I was at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, where Julie and I used to work together. I ran an organization called the National Risk Management Center, which had responsibility in the U.S. government for understanding risks to critical infrastructure, and I previously, before that, served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Infrastructure Protection, so I had a lot of opportunity to sort of help build out the way that the U.S. government approached managing critical infrastructure risk from cyber and other events. And one more thing pertinent to this group, I did have an opportunity to chair a group at the OECD called the High Level Risk Forum, where we were working across the OECD with OECD governments to better understand systemic risk issues and how to mitigate systemic risk issues.
Hello, everyone.
Sally.
I'm Sally Leavesley, and my field is catastrophic risk. I trained as a scientific advisor for all-out nuclear attack with the British Home Office, after which nothing is a problem, and looked at the impacts of tactical and strategic nuclear weapons on a very small country here with a very large nuclear inventory. Since then, since your last conference, Imperial College has appointed me as to be their Security Science Fellow, and in recent times, we have just in the last week now started a series of international meetings with nuclear physicists, engineers and others in countries in both hemispheres to look at critical energy security. Because we now have the threat of strategic and tactical nuclear weapons again, we are looking at the survival of energy and trying to create a new engineering model where we look at regeneration post-nuclear attack to identify the critical components, and it is a different form of resilience to just maintaining the resilience in our everyday lives. And that means we'll be looking at small modular reactors, we'll be looking at what the marine environment will do for restarts, how we can create ammonia from water, how megacities will need to be formed. And in conjunction with this, in the lead up to these critical events, we obviously cover all hazards. And on the dark side, we are going to be looking very much at cyber attacks such as we have seen, and many of you will have known about the Five Eyes warning in May 23 on Volt Typhoon, which unfortunately has gone across many areas of critical infrastructure in the United States and also in NATO countries, which isn't malware, but it has the capacity by a hostile country to actually turn your infrastructure off. And finally, I think in terms of what we are now becoming aware of, and it's the difference in landing a person on the moon to now landing a person on Mars, we are looking at brain organoids and the total difference and leverage this will give to countries by connecting brains grown in a laboratory to artificial intelligence generated technology. This is a total different level of command and control when joined up with space and other assets. So that's the good news.
Thank you, Julie, please.
Your portfolio is fascinating and frightening. I love it. I'm Julie Johnson with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA. I am the first attaché, not only in the UK, but on the planet. So that tells you how seriously we take this issue, especially if you knew the amount of paperwork and people that had to sign paperwork to get me over here. It means we know it's a shrinking world and that it's important that I'm here. So my background, I came from State Department and the intelligence community. Then I had the opportunity to go to New York City, where I actually saw how infrastructure works, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and realized that all of those policy decisions, everything I did in Washington, actually impacts all of those systems that sustain our way of life. So here I have the entire CISA portfolio. which is cybersecurity, physical security, emergency communications, extreme weather. It's a massive portfolio, but it all fits together. And so I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, and I think we've heard a little bit of everything from everyone here. And usually that's a negative, but here it really is a positive, especially when you're setting up a new role. But I really think we have to take that liberal arts view to the problem set and don't forget about any one piece of the puzzle. Right there.
Thank you. So as you can hear, many point of view, fascinating background and experience. And I'll start with asking some questions, and then I'll leave the stage to the audience. So my first question is to you, Stefano. You're dealing with models, and we're talking about a very, very complex world, many interdependencies. So how can models actually help us identify and mitigate weaknesses in essential infrastructure? And if you can give some examples from your work.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I would start talking about resiliency. I know that we spent a lot of time talking about that, but sometimes resiliency is confused with robustness. There are two very different concepts, because robustness is something that is related to the strength. I make an example. If you have a building, you want it robust with respect to earthquakes. You don't want resilient, because you don't want that the building collapses and then builds again. Okay, it's something really different. I make another example, very simple example. If you are standing, okay, just walking, and someone pushes you, you are able to remain standing more or less, well, until the push is too much. In that case, you are robust to some disturbances. But if someone pushes you too much and you fall down, what you have to do? First of all, you have to understand that you are on the floor. Then apply a second algorithm that is not the same as before. It's a different one, something that helps you to stand again. This is resilience. So resiliency, it is always related to understanding what is happening. If you do not understand, you are not doing resilience. Now, why I like models? Because I try to explain to everyone, sorry if I am a little bit academic, but I'm from the academy, so I can do. Models can help you to understand what's going on. If you have a good model telling you that due to some fact, there is a cascading effect that will involve other things that you are not seeing in that moment. So if models can help you to make a better situation assessment, also looking a little bit in the future, this may help you to take the right decision. Of course, you have to prepare a strategy for resilience. You must have some, more than one, but maybe you have different resilience strategies that you have to apply. So you need a model. But modeling is a very difficult activity. But it's a useful activity, because when you are preparing a model, you are studying your system, not like an engineer, not just to understand exactly how it's working inside, but which are the relations between other systems and your system, or which are the functional dependencies among the services that you consume and the services that you are providing to externally. These are the things that you have to understand in a situation involving an infrastructure, for example. And this activity is already useful, extremely useful, because it gives you the possibility to understand if there are other vulnerabilities, if your system is designed exactly. Then you can use this model maybe to produce a real-time software that is able to propagate your faults and then can give you a better situation assessment, as I said before. That's why I like models, and that's what I am doing all days.
Thank you. It's very hard to model chaos, right? Like the chaotic, well, maybe not, I'm not a modeler, but okay, so thank you very much. My next question is to you, Sally. And again, we have many different backgrounds. So in the face of geopolitical conflicts and unpredictable events like we see in reality, what do you consider the most significant global threat to societal resilience with respect to the areas that you're working in? And regarding this threat, what do you believe is the weakest link in our resiliency efforts?
Yeah, it's interesting because in catastrophic risk, what I find is it's often weakly connected systems come together at a point in time, and it can create a massive shock and have effects. However, the connectedness in systems, which we are denigrating to a great degree, I find in catastrophic events can often give a bounce and a greater flexibility in terms of what can you survive with in the end. And if I took this room and looked on this as a human factors system for resilience and what we can do, I'd suggest to you that there's a huge capability. If we went through everyone's capability in this room, I think as a group of scientists in the other disciplines, the way in which I'm trying to work to develop scientific mentoring capability within the academic sphere, I think for your countries and for institutions such as NATO, the United Nations and others, there is a great capability if we could get the connectedness of groups such as you working together across countries on the challenges of solutions that are essential. And what it means is, operationally in a crisis, your capability would then quickly feed into the civilian structure, because remember, governments have to look at their own survival, and the military has to. My concern is always the population survival, and I think groups such as this, if you can get a structure together and think of yourselves perhaps as scientific mentors, resilience mentors, I think by combining you, rather than just being in conferences, you could actually do a lot for your countries.
Can I,
Yes,
just
please,
before, just to try to connect the dots a little bit, that is, we're thinking, lived through a little bit of that during the pandemic from a US government response there. And to what you're saying and what you're saying is about how to take models, how to take capacity, capability, science, or whatever else, and deploy it in the middle of a crisis is kind of a little bit of what we're talking about. And one of my hobby horses is we certainly didn't do that well from a US government perspective. I know from doing OECD after action, most countries didn't do that very well because you didn't have the structures in place. You didn't have the governance, you didn't have the relationships, you weren't able to speed up contracting. You didn't have the visibility into the problem set to adjust the models to new data. I love models, but models, when it becomes reality, models need to be connected to data, and we need to use real information and not theoretic information. And so all of that is just a call to break down that and translate that so that you've got the rule set in place to deal with, to take advantage of modeling, take advantage of, I'm here talking sort of from a data perspective, and to take that all in the middle of crisis, and then of course get in front of the crisis and try to plan against that. But we don't do that very well as a society right now. We don't learn the lessons and prepare there. And so I know it's boring and a little bit hackneyed to talk about the last crisis, but we haven't yet solved for the structural lessons from the last crisis to be ready for the next crisis.
Could I come in on that?
Yes.
If I could just come in on that. During COVID, there are groups of nuclear physicists and medical doctors came together, and I chaired meetings across many countries. And the scientists, because they were a collective, as the COVID phases hit each country, the doctors and the scientists were able to help each other. And on the big data situation, it wasn't the immunologists and the specialists in the medical side who actually gave us the answers. Interestingly enough, it was a nuclear physicist at MIT who started off with a 5.5 billion population data analysis to create big data links, which were totally different in the information he was able to give us of what the actual deaths were going to be in relation to characteristics of people. It showed, and it just as a microcosm, this type of scientific grouping that you can do just gave us tremendous information and assistance.
Thank you. So information, again, is a crucial thing for societal resilience. And Julie, I would like to ask you, so you, having worked in both the UK and the United States, do you notice the significant differences in how these countries address physical and cyber threats and response strategy?
Well, I mean, first to these points, right? You're exactly right. Watching infrastructure fail. Look at Thames Water. Look at the Texas Power Grid. We don't have those owners and operators in the room with us right now. So to your points, they need to be part of this ongoing conversation, or it's not going to be the next huge catastrophe. It's going to be the failure of an infrastructure node time and time again. So the similarities, that's exactly the same in both countries. We come from non-regulatory societies predominantly, where the infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector, right? And where 90% of that is small and medium businesses. So how do we reach out to them? How are we having those conversations? And so the difference is, and part of this is simply a function of the size of the United States, CISA established a regional model where across the country, and you're familiar with this, Bob, we have 10 regions where locally you have cybersecurity advisors, physical security advisors, chemical, people that provide tools and training, people that understand the local infrastructure, who most importantly translate everything that comes out of Washington, D.C., or these events for that small owner and operator who has no idea what is going on here. We have mystified the majority of the public. So again, it's a function of the United States size, but that model has become very popular with my UK partners and partners across Europe, and especially partners in Ukraine who want to get a handle on local infrastructure, who runs it and what happens when it goes down, what are the cascading impacts and dependencies. On the UK side, where the UK certainly has an advantage, is just the agility to create new offices. It would take, an act of God and a turn of a ship for us to create a new federal office. For example, the AI Center of Excellence created overnight, right? Just a week ago or so, the UK declared data centers as critical infrastructure. From physical threats, cyber threats, extreme weather. I wish we could do that. Those are the single greatest point of failure we have right now. It doesn't always come with the money or the resources behind it, but I think pushing those initiatives to start those centers of excellence, to declare that critical infrastructure is absolutely vital.
Thank you. And Bob, just a question that I didn't have the chance to ask you before. Again, given your background, what is the weakest link in terms of societal resilience that you recognize having this very diverse experience? And Bob.
Sorry. The weakest link is somewhat situationally dependent. I spend a lot of my time thinking about supply chains, and one of the things related to weakest links is the thing that you don't control that can have some impact on your mission, your bottom line as a company, and all that. And if you don't have the ability to mitigate the risk directly yourself for something that ends up being crucial to something that's high value within your company, within the government, that whether it's the weakest link or not, it's the weakest link out of your touch. And so a lot of what I spend my time thinking about is try to identify critical supply nodes within that critical infrastructure that enables supply nodes, functions that you care about that enable business, and put some resilience into and vulnerability management into the weakest link, because the weakest link can be a piece of software where there's vulnerabilities that aren't available, that if the hacker gets in, critical information could be stolen, or a critical function could stop operating. The weakest link could be a piece of hardware that you rely on that, could be made counterfeit, and all of a sudden you can't get that hardware and you can't continue business. A weakest link could be, where something ships through in a, there's a port shutdown because of strike or because of a hurricane or all that. So all those are potentially, again, weakest link's probably not the right metaphor, but all those are potential linkages in your supply chain that can cause you to have vulnerabilities. And if you understand those, and then you put stuff into contracts, you develop alternatives, you develop robustness, you develop extra capacity, ability to solve problems on the fly, then you are strengthening your overall chain there, which means the system's less likely to fail.
Yes, I completely agree. But I think that one of the big problems that we have now is a kind of, let's say, underestimation of complexity. It's something that we are neglecting. It's something that we don't want to think to. But we live in a world that is extremely complex. It's made of complex systems. It's more than 20 years that we studied complex systems, as you know. And okay, let's figure out an example. Imagine a cylinder flying with inside 300 people, with a lot of engines and a lot of things to do just to keep it flying from an airport to another airport. And you want to fly it using 2 hands, 2 legs, and 2 eyes. There is something that is not working because we are pretending to manage or to deal with complex system in a too much simple way. Fortunately, airplanes can do everything by themselves. Not fortunately, it's the only way. It's the only way. So we need to reach another level. We need models, maybe, just to better understand what's going on and to let computers, programs written by people, I know, maybe, but I don't know how long. But anyway, written in a clever way just to manage these complex systems. And this is important. We need the companies, new companies, people, young people working on this problem. We have to improve the software that we have. If I have 1 second to make another example, think to a CISO, no? A Chief Information Security Office. There is a cyber breakthrough, okay? And then maybe you are in a good company, so maybe you have a cyber range in which you simulate your network host. You can also make a dump of a computer and put in the cyber range of an attacked computer, put in the cyber range and try to evolve the system just to understand if something really bad is going on. It's a very good instrument. But do you have a software that is able to understand which are the services that will be impacted clearly, no? To understand clearly which are the services, not the host, but the services that will be impacted, not only for you, maybe also for your customers. If you are in a supply chain, it's a disaster if you don't send out an alarm on what is happening. So we are not thinking of an impossible software. We are just thinking to something that is not common now. From the political point of view, I think that there is not a clear understanding of this, so they are not pushing enough.
Okay, and before I open the stage for question, I would like to ask you to answer briefly about this question. So, if decision makers would consult you about the first taking 2 actions or decision to be made tomorrow morning to improve resiliency, what would you tell them? And I'll start with you.
With what I'm seeing right now and what I'm discussing with my partners is making the public aware of what is a growing hybrid warfare environment with very unusual attacks against our infrastructure. We have gone from very overt, well, we still see globally, cyber attacks, kinetic attacks, but this death by 1,000 paper cuts, these things we've trained a public for see something, say something, see it, say it, sort it. But now what we have, what are in seemingly non-connected events and attacks on our infrastructure by sabotage, by proxy, by third parties. And I think we need to educate the public to a new way to see the threats to our infrastructure.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to talk about people power. What can you walk away with tomorrow and actually do? Incredibly, I consider we haven't really used the power of the academic institutions, particularly through what I'd call resilience apprenticeships in your departments, to get industry and business across all industry sectors and business, including law, to come in and for industry to send their active workforce into you, part-time or whatever, to work on their internal resilience problems under your tutorage and mentoring. So think about that as a massive way to build in resilience into your local communities and your country. And the second type of people power is picking up from what Julie was saying. The type of foundation that Julie was talking about, it fits in very much to what I'm thinking about at the moment of post-nuclear attack, where cities and towns are going to, in less affected areas of all countries, may have to consider becoming megacities or megatowns because people have to be moved so that radiation effects and contamination are not going to affect their lives. And the critical survival of a country comes from that capacity and the sort of inbuilt infrastructure capability that you're doing with those communities, that you can do that sort of thing.
Thank you. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I hit on two simple phrases all the time in this question: governance and metrics. You know, we can unpack a lot, but having the structure with the right people at the table who have the authorities and remit to deal with a problem to create resilience, and that only happens through governance in doing that. And the metrics, I'm not talking about this exactly the same metrics we're talking about in terms of should your insurance premiums be different because of resilience. I'm talking about what are the things that you care about that you can consistently measure whether you're making progress. Because if you don't have consistent measurement toward if resilience is your goal, risk mitigation or whatever, you're going to continue to just jump around and chase the problem of the day rather than making progress. Because once you have metrics and governance, then you can start to think about incentives and trade-offs.
Measurement, yes, please.
I would put money in cooperation because we have a lot of problems with cooperation, internal cooperation and international cooperation. I make a small example. We have a problem now that is related to cables and pipes that are connecting Italy with Tunisia, Egypt, maybe also Israel and Yugoslavia. And such cables and such pipes are almost under attack. So we have to do something, but it's very difficult that only the naval army or the air force can solve the problem. You have to work also with people that are expert of such infrastructures. So you have to set up an internal cooperation, maybe in Italy, between the army and the private sector. This is a public-private typical cooperation that could lead to a possible solution. And another problem is the international cooperations. For example, law enforcement agency have the problem to share information, even for cyber attacks. I talked last week to the director of the agency that is related to criminal investigations on cyber. And talking with other member states is not easy. Of course, in Europe, there is a cooperation, but it can be pushed more and more.
Right. Thank you very much. I mean, there's so many other interesting questions to ask, but I'll leave it to the audience now to have some questions.
Before the question, let me just remind any questioner, if you could please state your name and affiliation before the question, that would be helpful.
Udi Ganani, EIS. I think that this time we failed to have a dedicated communication session in the course of the 2 days. Looking at the title, Complex Systems, I think that there are like 4 billion phones like that people are carrying around. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the impact of each one of us carrying a phone on personal resilience? Positive, negative, complex?
This is something our emergency communication division deals with every day. It's not so much the person carrying it, it's who's pushing out the messaging, whether it's for an emergency or for other events that come up. I think, well, and just today, there were two I spent my morning, I was late here because two kids, their parents ran onto a tube train and left their children behind them. So I kept them there while they were crying and had no phones and waited for their parents to come back around. So day in, day out, there's a certain amount of utility to that. But I think the question really is, how are we as government officials and others using those devices to ensure public knowledge and public safety?
Yes. Look, last year there was a radio that was on in the conversation and what we were shown. In Israel, you had developed an EMP-proof radio, which I considered was a phenomenal advance for some sustained communications, because forget about anything that's dependent on space support for your communications. Look, when there have been very bad terrorist attacks in the UK, and I had to do media on this, I constantly suggested to families, and I still do when we get worry reports about people in the UK being subject to terror attacks. My message at the time of the heightened crisis was, when a family left a home, they had a plan. And the plan was where they would meet up, what they would do. And this preparedness right at the family unit level, in major crises, if people are exercised, such as you've been talking about, if even in a little family unit, they have a plan, there is some idea of what they're going to do, but they also have to recognise environmental cues of hazards. And this is an all hazard situation, if it's a tsunami or an earthquake. So there are various ways I think we can prepare the population to manage and to prepare for the loss of their communication devices. And as we've seen with some exploding devices in recent days, the fear of using devices is a problem. Hybrid warfare and the use on social media, my concern with some of the interlinking we're having is that the dynamics of social media through people's communication devices can very effectively, with certain cues, create mass crowd panics at a massive speed and rate. So we have to look at preparedness beforehand.
I needed you there this morning to talk to those parents.
I don't know if we have time because I keep, so
Everybody's hungry.
It's lunch.
I don't know if you have,
We already needed
no, I don't know if you have more time for questions, so I'll leave it to you to manage.
Sorry, Julie.
No, I'm always before lunch. I'm always before lunch.
So do we take more questions or we break
Lunch.
for
I
lunch?
think we're going to have lunch now.
And then find us over
I'm
there.
just going to give you one.
You guys get
one
lunch and just
request.
ask us questions.
One request. Wait, you got-
Okay, I'll do that again. I have only one request. Speak with somebody that you don't know. Just one. Just one. I can assure you that I have lots of friends here that I met in our conferences because I try to speak with somebody I don't know. Okay? And I will test you when I'll come back.
Right, so just let's thank this panel.
Yeah, always, Yossi. Thank you very much.
If I could add to Leahy's request as well, please. It's clear from the way the panels have gone this morning that you haven't been able to ask all of the questions that you'd like to ask. So as part of Leahy's request to introduce yourself to someone you don't know, use the lunch break to network and ask some of those questions. At the same time, we talked about working groups this morning, so I'd ask you to keep in mind the working groups. We've got a number of working groups which you might be interested in. So we've got resiliency and redundancy policy, communications and emergency management, black start and data centers. And then some additional groups we're minded to set up include media, education, community and finance. If you have any interest at all in those, and one assumes that you do, otherwise you wouldn't be here, please track me down or Chris or Leahy over the lunch break and have a conversation about what being part of those working groups involves. Thanks very much.
Okay. You're all back, which is a very good sign. Okay, so who's ready for his exam or her exam? Let's see. I have Udi here with 4 people that he didn't know and now he knows. Who can do more than 4? Yael, okay, that's good. You have until the end of the day. I see a lot of students here. I know you're used to exams, so we will try this again at the end of the day. Today, we are having a great panel with great friends. They're all here. Paul, I've been seeing him in the stream for the past 4 years now. He's a real person, so it's good to have you here, Paul. Are you ready?
Ready to go.
Ready to go. Okay.
Let me
You
start.
wanted to say something. I'm sorry, Paul.
Sure.
So this is my 1-minute motivational comment. Working groups. So the other test for all of us is, are we going to be serious about working on this subject? As Sally Livesley and others on the last panel said, the opportunity really is if we can start coming together, each of us in our own areas of expertise, different countries, different places on the planet, and working in common. So there are at least 6, and I think there may be about to be 7 working groups. The burden is pretty light. It's a 1-hour online meeting once a month. And I think in 1 or 2 cases, it's a 45-minute online meeting. But there are real products coming out of these, and it will mean enormous credibility for the policies, the recommendations that each of these groups come up with because of the scale and the variety of senior people, high-level people, students, those who are working in the working groups. Please join them. Join one of them, data centers, communications, resilience, redundancy policy, finance, transportation, education, and I hear a rumor that there may be a new one in formation on resilience, best practices in resilience, and media, sorry, forgot media. So please see Paul, see Chris Beck, where are you? Join one of them. I think there will be an email that go out after this summit in any case to remind people who may not have joined, but while you're thinking about it and while you have time, please think about which of these would be relevant, join one. And with that, over to you, Paul.
Okay, well, Avi, to you, Washington, and the support teams that made this conference possible, thank you so much for everything that you've done to enable success. As Avi mentioned earlier today, the next EIS handbook is coming out shortly. It'll be available on Amazon. I'm confident it'll also soon be a major motion picture. My plan is that I will be played by Brad Pitt. But just in case this doesn't happen soon, please do go to Amazon and get a copy of the handbook. I think you'll find it not only a good critique of the problems that we have today, but actionable recommendations. Again, going with the theme of everything that we're trying to accomplish here. Let me give you the bottom line up front of the handbook.
What's the title of the handbook?
Black Start for a Greener Grid, because we are heading, and we must head towards a greener grid, but that creates problems for Black Start, as we'll be discussing in a moment, with Jim leading off on resource adequacy. Let me give you the bottom line up front of the handbook. Black Start capabilities have never been more vital for societal resilience, and yet they've never been at greater risk. Folks, we're in trouble in terms of the viability of our Black Start capabilities and plans. Here's how we're going to proceed. I'm going to waste some of your time with the Black Start 101. A lot of you are experts in Black Start, but not everybody, so I'll make sure we level set. Then I'm going to ask each of our panelists a question or two in order, and we'll cover the waterfront, not again just complaining and admiring about the problem, but rather offering solutions to fix it. So Black Start 101. In just about every power restoration operation, after every blackout, countries in this room, we restored power from the outside in. That is, no matter how big the blacked out areas is, there's always some area on the periphery of that zone where generators are still up and running. You can bring that power into the blacked out zone to restart generators, provide house load, everything else that's required, and serve critical loads like hospitals as quickly as possible. But when, not if, China or Russia attempt to create a nationwide blackout, it won't be possible to bring power from the outside in. Instead, you're going to need to restart the grid from inside the blacked out area. And that's what Black Start is. That's the challenge of Black Start. And the way the handbook is structured, we break down the Black Start restoration process into 3 phases. The first one is pretty easy. That is, you have a Black Start resource, as identified by NERC. It's a little generator, sometimes hydro. You use that power, you send it down a dedicated transmission corridor, isolated, to restart the next generator, a little bit bigger, pick up some load, because you always need to keep load and generation in balance, right? And then more and more, you establish a power island within the blacked out area. The next phase, you start growing those power islands. You go to next start generation, typically big gas generators, multi-megawatt, larger. You add more load. And then the third phase is, well, you have adjacent power islands and you synchronize those. Not easy to do. And ultimately, in the United States, established the 3 interconnections, nationwide equivalents in all of your countries as well. So those are the 3 phases. And you know what? That is really easy for a political science PhD to describe what needs to happen. For actual people who know something about the power grid, including all of you, it's enormously complicated. And moreover, it's not going to be on a happy day. The reason you're black starting the grid is because China or Russia has launched an EMP attack or a huge cyber attack. And so you've got infrastructure that you need for black start. It's going to be disrupted. And moreover, for sure, all of the nations here should assume that once restoration is underway, our adversaries will prioritize the sustained disruption of black start operations. China spends every day mapping out U.S. black start infrastructure. That's what they're going to do, especially with the help of AI. So we need to be able to conduct black start in a contested, severely disrupted environment. And it's already hard, even without that stuff, right? So now, unless there are any questions on black start, you've got it. You're now experts. Let's turn to the Q&A. And what a terrific panel from a variety of perspectives here. I'm so grateful you're all here. And Jim, my old friend, I'd like to start with you as the first victim. So I said before, the title of the handbook is Black Start for a Greener Grid. But leaving aside for a moment the initial Black Start unit, the Black Start resource, we're heavily dependent on natural gas fueled generators for that second and third phase of Black Start. And boy, unanticipated retirements, especially in the PJM territory, but MISO elsewhere as well. How are we going to have enough generation capacity to pull black start, especially if some of that stuff is disrupted by a Chinese or Russian attack?
Okay. Yeah, I need to add one thing to your Black Start challenge, though. One of the things that's really, really difficult about Black Start is that you can't actually practice it.
We're going to come to that.
Okay.
That's your colleague's question.
All right. Okay. I'll leave that go. Yeah. So the changes in the grid are profound on multiple levels, not just on Black Start, but just general resource adequacy. If any of you follow the work that we do in North America, you see that we produce these maps annually that get more colorful, and more areas of the continent get colorful. And that's bad, because the more color that's on that map, the more risk we have associated with resource adequacy. And it's because of retirements of traditional generation, things that boil water and make something spin. When you do that, you get lots of great stuff. You get kilowatt hours, of course, but you also get frequency, you get voltage, and you get all the things that make the grid operate reliably. We're losing those. And we're replacing that generation, not one for one. We're coming close to replacing kilowatt hour production, but we're doing that with renewable resources, which interconnect onto the grid through a device called an inverter. And you have to, the inverter doesn't create frequency, it doesn't create voltage, it can follow the grid, it can synchronize with the grid, but it can't create the grid. One of the big issues as we move forward with more and more inverter resources. They also operate through power electronics. So they're vulnerable to all of the things that any distributed electronic device on the grid would have. So as Paul mentioned, as we lose spinning generation, we replace it with power electronic based generation. We create resource adequacy issues, concerns about whether we'll have enough energy. We may have plenty of capacity, but we may not have energy because we have to have fuel to have energy, which means the wind's got to blow, the sun's got to shine, or the natural gas has to be there in front of the plant at the moment that you're trying to generate. And during extreme events, particularly extreme winter events, all three of those are in question, right? Because during really, really cold spells, we frequently don't have wind. If it's a winter event, frequently the solar doesn't generate because either, shorter days, so there's not enough solar radiation, or the panels are covered with snow, right? So they don't operate. And natural gas gets disrupted, either because wells have frozen up, or pipelines have failed, or people are heating their houses so much there's no gas left for power generation. So it's a real quandary. How we're going to sustain the capacity that can actually create the grid and assure that we have fuel behind it to be able to generate. That's true on any given day of the year. In a black start situation, it's even more complex because you need to have the fuel there in order to get the burning embers from the campfire to kind of fire up to be able to get the kindling to burn and then to get the real logs to burn. And that's the challenge that we've got.
Jim, I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself, CEO of NERC. If you could just say a word or two about what NERC does,
Sure.
It'd be enormously helpful in the context of contested black start.
Sure. So I'm sorry, I should have caught that. First of all, it's great to be back. So thanks for having me. So NERC is a very unusual organization. I think we're the only organization like us in the world. We are set up to be a technical regulator of the grid. So the way I describe my role to people is that I'm sort of the trade association for physics. We focus on making sure that the grid can operate reliably. We set operating and planning standards for how the grid's designed, how it's built, how it's operated. And we also do critical infrastructure protection standards, both physical and cybersecurity, focused at the bulk power system level. So high voltage transmission, usually 69 kV and above, and larger power plants, 75 MVA, 75 megawatts and above. So big stuff, right? The interstate transmission grid, if you will, is our purview.
And you also set requirements, mandatory requirements for the testing of black start.
Yes.
But only in a very limited way.
Right.
And that gets us to Ben. So Ben, introduce yourself, say a few words about National Grid. And then the question that I have for you is, right now, we have no remotely realistic testing of black start plans and capabilities that we need in the aftermath of a black sky event. How do you try to build preparedness when you can't do an actual giant nationwide blackout because you'd kill Granny?
A hell of a question there to start this section of the panel off. Thank you. So I'm Ben Coachter. I am the Director for Resilience and Crisis Management for National Grid PLC. So National Grid operates in both the UK and the US, and we operate across both gas and electricity transmission and distribution, depending on what side of the pond you're on. Coming to your question and sort of building on what Jim mentioned earlier, there's quite a lot of scenarios for us to have to model. and the risk profile constantly changes. So in the UK, we're welcoming or ushering in a new electricity restoration standard. So we'll be looking to restore something like 60% of the load within about 24 hours. Wow. And 100% in about 5 days. So that's quite a significant feat for even the UK, which is an island, a very small island compared to the size of the US, right? But still, it comes with quite a swathe of complexity, which you just can't escape no matter where you are in the world. Interestingly as well, the electricity system operator in the UK launched a really interesting project called Distributed Restart. And I don't know if anyone, there's a show of hands if anyone's familiar with it or heard of it, Distributed Restart, only a couple. So definitely in the spare time or in your spare time, go and have a look. I can't sort of, stress this enough. Absolutely, lessons learned, something that is absolutely transferable is having a look at that project, Distributed Restart, which was run by the ESO. It was over a couple of years. What they were able to do is prove that you could restart the grid from the inside out. So they actually used hydro and steam, I believe, to do this, and they were able to reboot distribution and transmission all the way up to 400 kV. So it's an awesome project to go and have a look at. So we know it can be done.
Repeat the name so everybody can write it down,
Sure.
including me.
Distributed Restart. You can Google it. It's all over Google. I'm sure it'll be the #1 search result when you have a look at that. But it's an awesome project, and there's more that was involved with that project. So not only did they technically prove that it was viable, but they also spent quite a lot of time and did produce quite some significant outputs in terms of the control systems that would underpin that whole process. Right? So it wasn't just a simple, trivial, I take that word back, it's not trivial, not a tabletop exercise that they ran. There was a lot more depth to it, so definitely worth having a look at that.
Very cool.
Having a look at that. But just going back to what National Grid does in both the UK and the US is we look at the risk profile. So in the UK, there's the National Risk Register. In the US, we've got NERC reports that help us identify some of those emerging risks and various other information that comes out of the DOE or DHS and other federal government departments. And that's really useful to us because it enables us to sort of take a step back and understand, well, what is the immediate threat, right? What is on the horizon today and tomorrow? We also, work with other utilities, other government departments. We do a lot of collaborative crisis management training and exercising to make sure that we're not just testing the network operations, but we're also testing our people and our processes. And that's a very constant thing. I mean, we've got one coming up on cyber, I believe, in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be really stress testing the organization all the way up through our operational businesses, most of them, all the way through up into our executive. So this is a constant. We're not complacent. We don't sit back and sort of wait for things to happen. We're all over this, and it's one of the big reasons that we're confident enough to put about $75 billion on the table to invest in our networks in the UK and the US over the next sort of 5 years or so.
Very cool. That gets us to Bronwyn, because obviously distribution level infrastructure serving that last mile of service to hospitals, police stations, everything else that's needed for public health and safety. Say a little bit about your role at National Grid. And then my question to you is related to the whole purpose of this conference. How can we strengthen societal resilience in an environment where, certainly in the case of the People's Republic of China, the intelligence community finding in the annual report this year is a top goal of Chinese attacks on U.S. infrastructure is to incite societal panic. That's the goal. So looking at what your resilience portfolio encompasses, how do we build societal resilience against an adversary that's going to intentionally attack infrastructure to incite panic?
Thanks, Paul. So my name is Bronwyn Bullen, and I'm head of organizational resilience for a company called UK Power Networks. And we are the distribution network operator, so that's the level down from transmission, as Paul said. It's that last mile of ensuring electricity can come from transmission into the homes, hospitals, all of these parts of society that we depend on. And it's absolutely fundamentally vital that, in my opinion, if we look at what this panel is about and it's learning lessons from the work that we do as a collective and how we can apply those within society. We're going to sit here and we can talk about many very interesting things and technical discussions, but what does that mean for you and how does that translate to us as society being resilient? When we talk about exercises, we do a huge amount of exercises. When we work with National Grid and we talk about black start restoration and you think about some of the complexities behind it, there is a huge amount of work that goes into that. But within society, what can you take from that? How do you become prepared for these sorts of events? And we're talking Black Start today, but it's not just limited to Black Start. There are Black Sky events, anything that can trigger panic, chaos. We rely on society being calm. When we look at resilient, it means being prepared. What does that mean from a society point of view? What can you take into your control to prepare for these sorts of things? One of the things I've just recently done at work was we ran an exercise. We had a leaders conference where I had a lot of our senior leaders in the room, and unexpectedly, they didn't know, I made sure our CEO knew about this, but I simulated a bit of a black start. So while I was presenting, I got them to switch off all the lights, switch off my presentation and turn off my microphone. And our head of network operations and control was in the room, and he was obviously planted to receive a call to confirm that in fact there was a black start scenario. And I had prepared individuals around the whole of the organization to text their managers who had no idea that they'd be receiving these text messages, talking about the lights have gone out in the office and it looks like everybody around us is coming out, and we think we're going to head home. Somebody was stuck in a lift and she didn't know what to do. And unfortunately, this lady truly is claustrophobic, so she was panicking. And so around the room, they started pinging and receiving these messages. And I put to them and I said, we are an engineering-based organization. Black Start is largely an operational response, but in fact, there are so many interdependencies around that can be the undoing of that if we don't look at those bits and elements within our organization, and I put to you within society, we can actually not have a very resilient response to a black start. And so we started, I posed questions to them such as, if we walked out of this room now, and I'll ask you the same, how many of you have got cash on you to be able to jump into a cab to get home? We wouldn't have traffic, okay? Okay, so, but it's good, but we don't think like that anymore. Traffic lights would be out, so there would be chaos. I don't know how many have traveled from far and how many cabs would actually be available to us. And as we look at our response, Ben was saying we would look to have 60% of the grid back on within 24 hours, but those 24 hours, it's a long time to be without electricity. You think about house alarms, business alarms are going to start going off, it's going to be noisy. I almost guarantee there might be looting in the streets, and those of us who are parents who need to get to your children, how do you think about, put yourself into that scenario in the same way that I try to do within our organization, and how do you walk through the steps of what would be required of you? We cannot exercise end to end, but we can think about these key touch points. And for me, resilience is about integration and almost an enmeshment. I think about you've got to have integration, vertical and horizontal, and when you have that enmeshment, whenever the impact comes, if you're properly integrated, you can absorb the impact to a degree. If we go down just vertical or horizontal, even that's not enough. So
that's a great way of framing the problem and the opportunity. So Lily, you are so lucky being a senior leader for your portfolio, not only building resilience of energy systems, but also incident management, really the sweet spot for this discussion of contested black start. Tell us a little bit about your background, but then my question to you is, there's so many threats out there, vulnerabilities, high consequence events. What are the biggest initiatives that you are helping lead and the Department of Energy is leading to strengthen resilience and make black start restoration both less necessary, that is, we're less likely to need it, but also if it happens, it's going to work better?
Sure, thanks, Paul. Yes, so Lily Colon, I am the Principal Deputy Director for CSER. CSER like salad, CSER is correct. The acronym stands for Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response. Our portfolio spans across all hazard events, not just cyber. So we do deal with emergency response to natural hazards as well. We focus our portfolio and kind of mitigate some of these situations through various means. It includes policy work, it includes preparedness initiatives. We do research and development to develop tools and technologies for the sector. And when I speak of the sector, I mean we as the lead sector risk management agency for energy oversee over 3,000 electric utility companies and over 1,000 oil and natural gas companies. And so that's a lot of companies for a small and mighty team that CSER is. We cannot be all things to all people. And so therefore, we try to ensure that our portfolio is focused and tailored for the ones that need it most. So 3 things that come to mind that I do want to highlight here. The first one is the Energy Threat Analysis Center, ETAC for short. ETAC is basically a program that helps us collaborate with all utility companies. Our goal here is for us to aim to proactively share threat information at machine speed as quickly as possible, right? We want to get the data in the hands of the people that need it most and quickly so that then we can action it, right? It's not enough just to do information sharing for the sake of information sharing, right? We want you to action it so that we can protect ourselves quickly. To Paul's comment earlier, it's not if, it's when it happens, so how do you respond to that? The second thing I want to say is left-a-boom. In regards to preparedness, some of the things that CSER focuses on heavily is training and exercises. This is an area that I'm very passionate about, not just training our workforce, but giving the tools that our operators need to be able to plan accordingly. Let's start with first understanding your network, know how to respond to that, have a plan, and then exercise the plan so it's not just shelfware, right? So train the staff to be able to do that and then exercise it on the back end. So we do a lot of that. If you ask me if I was king for a day, I would love to do that at scale as quickly as possible. There's just so much out there that we would love to support. And then the other area I would say is the small, medium-sized companies. So for example, DOE as a department, CSER specifically, does a lot of funding opportunity announcements. And so our goal is to ensure that we are providing resources to small utility co-ops, munis co-ops, organizations to drive cybersecurity best practices, measures in place so that they can be better equipped to answer the threat of tomorrow, essentially. We start with those what we called resource poor target-rich entities. Essentially, if you're targeting these organizations, there's a big impact on the grid, right? And so we're trying to ensure that they're resilient and prepared to do that. And so we provide a lot of grant funding, a lot of infrastructure through the infrastructure bill. We provide a lot of resources through that as well. That's another mechanism. Just the department alone has had over, I think, $600 billion. CSER specifically has a small piece of that portfolio, but we're very excited about that.
It's terrific and a big impact. And as you say, some of these small, in some cases, very small rural cooperatives and public power, they're serving incredibly important defense installations. So I love what you're doing. So we have some time for Q&A in a minute. But before we do that, I want to ask everybody who'd like to speak to it. The big argument, one of the big arguments of the handbook is that as we transition to a grid that moves away from centralized fossil generation to millions of solar installations, wind installations, these inverter-based resources with battery energy storage systems, we have an opportunity to change the game of Black Start. And instead of following that sequential process I described in Black Start 101, have widely distributed capabilities to restart the grid using new power electronics called grid-forming inverters. Am I smoking the strong stuff? Or is this actually going to be viable from a physics and engineering basis? I turn it over to all of you to offer your thoughts. Jim, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. So There's clearly an opportunity here. It's going to be tied to batteries, because one of the issues you have to have for black start is you need to have the energy source. So as long as the batteries have charge in them, right, which is an issue, right, because you want to make sure that you've always got some amount of baseline charge in the batteries, you have an energy supply. The second issue is the inverter, as you say, has to form the grid, which means it needs to be able to create frequency and voltage in order to synchronize, right, and allow other devices to connect at the and operate synchronously. It's an existing technology. It's not a fully proved technology. From my understanding is that there are deployments of grid forming inverters in Hawaii and in Australia, two areas with a fair amount of particularly photovoltaic production. Like most things with electronics, they perform mostly the way you think they're going to, but they always surprise you along the way. So there's still a fair amount of study that needs to be done. You know, we understand how, again, things that spin, we know how that works because it's a physical process. When you're doing things through power electronics, there's more variability and more things to understand. So I think the possibility is certainly there. We will need to figure this out as we continue to change the grid over to more distributed inverter-based resources, but we're not there yet.
Additional thoughts, or does that cover it?
Can't argue with physics, can you, really?
You can't change the laws of them.
No, well, so I think what I want to add to this is Jim's, really valid points here. I think the other thing that we can't miss is the markets that underpin that. The fundamental way in which the grid operates from a commercial perspective will also be very different and present a new set of challenges compared to what it is today. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, the handbook has a long list of what it's going to take to make this real. I urge you to take a look at it, because again, the EIS Council approach is, let's not just admire the problem, let's sequentially fix problems so we can end up with a system that provides for black start in a greener grid. Now, for the first question, I'd like to call on Joe McClellan, who's all things national security and resilience at FERC. Joe, we're so grateful you could join us. You get the first question or comment.
Hi, I'm Joe McClelland. I'm the Director of the Office of Energy Infrastructure Security at the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I'm not sure I'm what Paul said, but I'll do my best with this question. I think this is a great panel, and it's a critical issue. And I would say another great panel here for today. So the question I have really isn't where the puck is now, but where is the puck going? Where's the hockey puck going? And so the question I have, maybe we'll start with Jim or Ben or anyone, is how might these black start units change? And that would include the tertiary units that support reactive power. How might they change with the changes that we're seeing in the power grid? And that would be the rapid retirement of the prime movers. So especially coal, on-site fuel, heavy inertia, as Jim said, has all the characteristics that you would expect from a prime mover, from a baseload source. And combined with a large influx of renewables, that'd be wind and solar. And it's really the capacity factors as well as dispatchability of these renewable resources. Looking at increased interdependencies. So I'm going to just layer this question, right? So single source fuel dependency, for example, natural gas pipelines, knowing that they're being targeted by adversaries. There have been campaigns to target the control systems of these pipelines. And then lastly, I think it's just the real zinger, is increased electrification of the grid. So we're seeing an increase, we'll see significant increase from EVs, from data centers, from the retirement of fossil fuel appliances. All these things are converging, and we have relatively low capacity factors and even at times availability from these renewable resources. It isn't just the preservation of the baseload resources, but what about changes in those resources? Will we see, should they be larger? Are we looking at specific locations? That type of an issue.
Sure. What a question.
Do you remember the question?
I think
Ben, there's a lot on the stake.
Yeah, that warrants an essay for a response, I think. No, thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and it's one that we're thinking about quite intensely, I'd say, at the moment, because in the UK, we're actually retiring our very last coal-fired plant, which was Ratcliffe. So we're going to be riding through this winter with no traditional sort of coal-fired baseload there. Now, don't get me wrong, we've got nuclear, we've got gas still available, we'll be just fine. If anyone's seen the winter outlooks in the UK, not an issue, but principally it is a very different way to how we operate the grid today, right? So years ago, we would have just fired up the coal, fired up the gas, would have just slipped straight through, no issues on the network. And this is in the UK, right? So it's very different to the US, and I'll talk about that in a minute and then hand over to Jim. Now, this winter, there's a really interesting look at sort of what we call the Demand Flexibility Service Program, which is ways in which the system operator interacts with the customer to be able to get a bit back, get a bit of capacity back, or sort of ease the peak demand a little bit using things like DFS. So that's one way that we're dealing with that retirement of, say, coal, right? We're also very keenly interested in a lot of work that's going on around small modular reactors, right? So there's a big effort that's going on there, linked in with Rolls-Royce, and we've been exploring sort of what's going on in that space to sort of boost that baseload as well. We've got Hinkley Point C, which is another huge nuclear facility that will be coming online in the near future as well. So I think, you know, that stepping stone is we're still going to require that sort of, that generation, nuclear, for example, to get us through and help with that baseload. But I think these innovative products like DFS, or these demand flexibility schemes, and the uptake of smart meters in the UK, the uptake of open data and these APIs, it allows for more creative and ingenious ways in which all that information can be shared to just more smartly control the network, with these smart appliances coming online, with cars that can charge at the appropriate time to relieve peak as well. So the whole way the grid is operating, not just from that sort of linear A to B kind of generation to consumption point is changing, but the way in which it sort of works both ways is changing significantly in the UK. So yeah, really interesting. And then just in the US, it's very different over there. So we've got interstate pipeline, we've got stresses on the interstate pipelines, especially around New England. We haven't had a new pipeline there for quite some time. So, and there's been a lot of retirements. I think Mystic was due to be retired, or I think they may have brought that back on. Forgive me, can't remember. Facility. Yeah, the LNG facility. So there's been talk of retirements, withdrawals of retirements. It's more of a state of flux, I'd say, over there than it is in the UK. But again, one thing is that we've got a very well-supported vision for gas and electricity over there. The ESMP, for those of you that are familiar with it, and the run-up into our next reg period over there, or rate case, it's looking really positive. So I'm sure we'll get that over the line over the coming years for sure. Jim?
So I think you hit a number of the important issues. I'd underscore 3 or 4 maybe. One is we're heading towards a world that's going to be much more fuel constrained, energy constrained than capacity constrained. Because customers don't actually, I mean, we always plan the grid around making sure we have enough capacity for the peak hour, right? And then a reserve margin on top of that. And we figure if we can serve that peak hour, we can probably serve every other hour of the year. That's the traditional utility planning paradigm. Well, with variable generation resources and variable fuel resources, so wind, solar being a larger portion of the grid, eventually, you know, more than half of it. Natural gas having deliverability issues, particularly during very cold weather. Being able to serve the peak load doesn't tell you anything about the other 87, 59 hours, right? So you have to start looking at energy. And energy availability and energy supply, which also means you need to be much better at understanding fuel and where fuel is coming from. So the whole utility planning paradigm changes as a result, and the operating paradigm needs to shift much more around making sure you've got enough capacity online to making sure you've got fuel behind it. Very different way of thinking about the business. The second issue is that the transition away from a central station centric model to one that's more distributed, with wind and solar, rooftop distributed generation and so forth, changes the complexity for the grid operator immensely. Because now rather than 100, right, generating resources, you've got thousands, right? You have to figure out how you're going to coordinate those and organize and orchestrate those to be able to deliver power to customers and do it in a way that the grid remains stable, no small feat. The way I kind of think about it, if you're a grid operator now, you really don't know what load you're going to serve because it's mostly masked by rooftop solar and behind the meter generation. And you don't know what energy supplies you're going to have because you don't know at any point in time if the wind's going to blow, if the sun's going to shine, or if natural gas is going to show up in the winter. And you somehow have to keep this grid perfectly balanced. I mean, other than that, it's a great job. But that's really, really hard and becoming increasingly hard. Third point I would make is that this was hard enough when we were in stable load. Now if you add on very, very large data centers, industrial complexes, some on the order of magnitude of 2 gigawatts for a single point undiversified load. That's twice the size of the city of San Francisco, for example. That creates all kinds of resource issues, right? Where are you going to get the generation from? But then how are those facilities going to impact the operation of the grid? Because we don't have single undiversified loads of that scale on the grid right now. So that creates a whole can of worms. And then the fourth issue I would say is that in the spirit of black start, you're absolutely right? The black start situation is going to come during a major cold event, during a tropical storm, right? Because we see that now, right? Whenever there's something bad going on weather-wise, we see the cyber activity go up of our adversaries and so forth. So figuring out how you're going to actually restart the system or even just restore parts of the system during these incredibly bad scenarios is also something that we got to keep in mind.
Well, can I just add to that?
Oh, please.
I was just going to say this question for me underpins the interesting tension that we have within resilience and, say, policy making, and that the two rarely have to be joined up because the wrong policy or the policies for the wrong reasons could actually undermine the resilience that we have in place. And I know that achieving net zero it's very important and it drives a lot of the renewable changes that we've got going ahead. But as with anything, change management and the things that underpin resilience, we cannot make those decisions in isolation. Where is the puck going to land up? But what do we actually need? And we cannot undermine what we have at the moment for the sake of whatever the policy
Very
might be
nice.
looking.
So we are out of time almost. We have just a moment for each of our panelists to offer a comment. And I'd like the comment to be, if you are queen for a day, or king, or something general neutral version, what would you do to strengthen Black Start, either from a resilience and preparedness perspective, or to be able to more effectively respond to an emergency? And we'll go in reverse order, starting with you, please, Lily.
Sure. So I would say the word that comes to mind is urgency. The threat moves at machine speed. Our policies do not. We've talked a lot this morning about collaboration. We talked a lot that it takes a whole of nation, a whole of government approach. But in order for us to do that, we all have to come together. And what I call the ego of business needs to be put to the side, right? If we all really believe in this is truly a thing that we should focus, then our investments should align to that principle, to that priority. And so when I'm thinking of urgency, I would say if we can all come together and collaborate. I think we've talked about many working groups. Let's participate. Let's encourage each other. Great minds come together, whether it's industry, academia, government. We all need each other to make sure that we are preparing ourselves for tomorrow. It's not if, it's going to be when. Yeah. It's a known entity. It's been congressionally said. It's been documented in many reports through the intelligence communities. And so it's going to take all of us to ensure that we are protecting ourselves, preparing ourselves.
I don't think you'll be surprised to know that I'm going to say integration. This has been my theme as well. For me, that's critical, and I don't think there is enough of it. But I think that that's one of our challenges is people don't necessarily know how to go about it. So somebody has to start the conversation, and we shouldn't sit around waiting for somebody else to do that. I think that embedded within organizations and across society, we need to have more focus on resilience. I know that chief resilience officers are something that are coming about within the UK. And I think that if we can embed that throughout the different parts of society and levels of society, having that central cohesion will go a long way to doing it, to serving the purpose.
Good.
Yeah, so I think I'll try and make mine really simple and straightforward, hopefully. I've been thinking about it for the last minute. But I would say metrics that drive investment, not compliance. I might be wrong.
That would be big. Big and high impact.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, you know, we need to make that investment. We know where the gaps are. We need to drive the money into the right place, and we need the metrics to do that, because the more that we focus on compliance, that slows things down.
Good.
So there we go.
That was a very pithy and profound. I'm going to reflect on that for a while. You know, I think the one thing I would add to the soup here is it's expensive to have black start capability. Right, the way you have to maintain the plant, the way you have to maintain your fuel supply. You know, if it's batteries, you got to make sure that there's actually some juice in the battery and so forth. And I think one of the big questions I have, and this permeates not just black start, but many things about the reliability of the generation fleet, is making sure that the market rules adequately reward and support the investment in those capabilities for those assets that are truly critical.
Yeah, Jim, and work with regulators who are responsible for cost recovery.
Yep.
To ensure that happens. Let me add, that is one of the recommendations, of course, of the handbook. Let me add one other in closing. That is, we haven't talked about prioritizing load pickup. Which customers are going to get served first as we pick up generation and are able to serve more load. Bob Kolaski, this is really partly where you live, and that is every transmission system operator develops a plan for prioritizing load pickup, and partly it's physics, I get that, but there's not enough Schlitz to go around. Schlitz being a delicious beer from my youth. National security versus public safety versus public health. There is going to be a huge conflict that is right now buried under the surface about who gets power first. And one of the recommendations of the handbook is let's bring together state and local governments, transmission operators, emergency managers, everybody who needs to be part of this discussion, in addition to transmission system operators and reliability coordinators, and probably your regions, Jim, in order to build consensus on this, so we have a plan in place instead of making it up as we go along. So with that, thank you very much. I apologize for not having enough time for questions. That's the fault of the previous panels.
Thank you, Paul.
Set your laptop right on it. By the way, there's one short PC print that's 5 minutes. Just about. So this isn't a break.
Everyone go back to your seats. You had enough break today. Okay, I've been forced. You have 5 minutes. You have to be?
Yeah, I have to leave because I have to catch a train.
So you can start anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do it.
You don't have a break.
No.
Elijah needs to go.
The whole day, but he's so far there.
Do we have the next speaker ready to be mic'd
Yes,
up?
Elijah. I'm going to bring that.
Where am I? It's okay.
How do you pronounce it?
Elisa.
Spell it.
No, with an A. Elisa.
Elisa with an H?
Yeah. No, with an A. Elisa.
Alisa. I don't know why I had Elijah in my head.
No, don't worry. Mom.
You're gonna use this one?
Yeah, I'll use that. Okay. It's all good. Okay. I know. Do you want me to bring them back? I'll just yell.
Yeah, do that, do that.
Okay. All right, everybody. Hello. My teaching voice is on. I do have to catch a train, unfortunately, and I am the first of our PhD students at the ISST to speak to you through this event. So I'd appreciate it if you'd like to stay, if you could take a seat. If you'd like to leave, please do that quietly so I can make sure that I keep my time to 5 minutes, please. Super quick. I'll pause so that way everybody's out of the room who doesn't want to be here. I'm giving you a summary of what I'm doing with my PhD. All right. So super quickly, I wanted to have some quick notes. Please do not film or take pictures of me. I have publications coming out and I do not want to be targeted online. Please respect that. I don't want my image or content from this being posted anywhere to make sure that I'm safe because I'm a PhD student and I don't have institutional support as of yet. So with that being said, my name is Elisa Cherwinski and I'm
Amos, right? Amos's keynote. Well, we have a knowledge nugget. Okay.
Okay, you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so happy to be here. This is my first time, so thank you for inviting me. My topic today is the distribution network resilience and the impact on the community's sense of security. In a way, it's a continuation of the previous session leading us to the current session. Let me see if it works. Yeah, okay. No. Who can help me here?
I'm good in solving.
Yeah, great. Good that you are here. So first, a few words about EnergyCom. EnergyCom is the energy innovation community of Israel. We are a non-profit, semi-organizational organization. We have 5,500 members from all the ecosystem, startup, mature companies, private companies, traded companies, and so on and so forth. First, I would like to differentiate between resilience and immunity. I believe that early in the morning we got a definition of resilience. So my definition is that resilience is the ability to withstand and recover from disruption, whereby immunity is the ability to endure continuous energy supply during adverse conditions. So the bottom line is that the key factor, that energy immunity is the key factor in providing energy security and, more important, sense of security to the community. There are different challenges, some of them predictable and some of them not. For example, let's take natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, and wildfires. The occurrence of these events is beyond the human control. Therefore, a strong, professional, effective means of immunity are required. As far as human factors like cyber attacks, vandalism, and human errors, these events are predictable and manageable. Same goes to aging infrastructure, outdated equipment and technology. Again, these factors are manageable by the right planning and execution. And regulatory and financial constraints, policy barriers, and limited resources. So the bottom line here is that except for natural disaster, all other challenges are manageable in sense that one can prevent them upfront. So let's dive into the main elements focusing on the implementation level. First, infrastructure, robust physical structure such as substations and underground power lines. I intentionally indicate those two elements. The substations are existing proven technology. Same for the power lines, but high percentage of them are upper lines, which means high probability of destruction during disaster times. Second is redundancy. The meaning of redundancy is trivial, preventing single points of failure. In the midst of the distributed energy era, the solutions are there, and I'll elaborate later. Thirdly, automation. The function of automation is to endure fast response. We are looking at smart meters, smart grids, and automated system for management and control. Last but not least, cybersecurity, which you are more familiar than me. Today, one cannot avoid exponentially digital threats, so this part is a part of the overall activities ensuring network resilience. So we identify few factors for distribution network resilience. Let's discuss one of them, technology. It seems that we don't have to invent the wheel. Smart grid are there, real-time monitoring and automated response. IoT sensors for early detection of faults and failures. Artificial intelligence, predictive analytics for maintenance and load management. And blockchain, secure and transparent energy transaction. With these elements, we can perform the relevant activities such as grid modernization, which means upgrading infrastructure and integrating smart technologies. We can do decentralization, incorporating distributed energy resources like solar and wind. Predictive maintenance, using data analytics to foresee and address issues. And microgrids, localized grid that can operate independently. Speaking about microgrids, we must carefully analyze the interaction between microgrids and national grids. For the purpose of this discussion, microgrid is resilient during outages, while national grid is vulnerable to widespread outages. On the other hand, microgrid is limited in scale, while national grid has a broad coverage and enjoy economics of scale. So on one hand, the current trend is to expand local networks, enabling small communities to be self-supported. On the other hand, the national grid is the energy system backbone. The bottom line here is that for achieving network resilience, we should adopt a holistic approach, maximizing the benefits of both energy structures and minimize the disadvantages of each one of them. Another factor which plays a major role is policy and regulation. It is known that regulation is lagging behind technological innovation. Well, advanced government can promote resilience by means of grants, incentives, fast response to market needs, and regulatory mitigation where it is necessary. The success of implementing policy and regulation depends on collaboration, such as public-private partnership. And in the same way, community engagement is a precondition to a successful plan. Let's go over one case study. Well, the map shows the part of southern Israel that was attacked back on October 7th, 2023. For about 8 to 36 hours, people were without electricity while a real war had happened outside their homes. I'm using this example to demonstrate the importance of a robust distribution network on the security of supply in times of war. On October 19, the Tkuma Directory was established with the mission to return and settle communities. A dedicated team was appointed to prepare a 5-year energy plan and budget. The main criteria were to provide energy security, and more than this, energy sense of security as a trigger to the population return to the area. Basically, the plan consists of elements described earlier, such as subsoil cabling, integration of PV and batteries, management software to ensure energy continuity. So to sum up, think that I'm okay with the time. It's a combined effort of all the energy ecosystem, including operators, regulators, municipalities, equipment and software suppliers, and the local civilian communities. Most of the efforts should focus on renewable integration, energy storage, resilient design, protected infrastructure, and expanding microgrids. By doing so, we are creating a green grid that leads to a network resilience, which is one of the solutions for the climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amos. Thank you very much, Amos. I'd ask you to please take a seat, and if Yoav and Ivan can come down, we'll get mic'd up, and we'll pick up this discussion in the form of a panel, starting in just a minute.
תודה, תודה. אני צריך לשמוע מילים, אתה כל כך מודאגת.
Forward to a discussion now. The topic, we got to have Amos Lasker as an introduction, talking about in this discussion, climate change, turning the grid green, and investing for the future. We're going to keep expanding on those ideas. So since we just heard from Amos, I'm going to just briefly ask Yoav and then Ivan to give us quickly introduce yourself, a little background, and one or two key points, and then we'll have a discussion.
Okay, so I'm Yoav Yair, outgoing Dean of the School of Sustainability at Reichman University in Herzliya, that's near Tel Aviv. I'm a cloud physicist and atmospheric scientist by training, and I'm here with the capacity to talk about climate change, which I think is the elephant in the room, or should I say the lion in the room, because elephants are kind animals, and we tend to disregard elephants, but put a lion in the room as a metaphor for the threat of climate change, and I think we're going to elaborate on that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Ivan.